Yes. Can you, real quick, do you want to introduce people to who you are and what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure, mate. So my name's Rob, and I run quite a small YouTube channel based around psychedelic experiences called Adeptus Psychonautica. And the gist of what I try and do on there is try and just represent the sort of the ordinary person who is interested in psychedelics, but hasn't necessarily gone down the full sort of transcendent hippie sort of path, and nor has gone down the sort of this is just sort of pure just drugs act, it's just a hallucination. So I'm sort of aiming for that sort of middle ground, being the kind of the voice in the middle there. And I make sort of videos about trip reports and sort of experiences with these substances, and also experiences of when I've been on something like like an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, and I do review videos of good retreats versus bad retreats, and yeah, that's basically what I do.
Okay, yeah, cool.
And
you wanted to chat with me specifically. I think you probably saw the maps thing I did.
Well, I saw a couple of your videos, and the first one that I saw that I got interested in, the reason I kind of wanted to reach out to you was the one you did around your 10.5 gram mushroom trip, which I watched, and I was absolutely captivated, because it seems like you got everything possible from this experience. You talk about sort of, parallel dimensions and sort of time slowing down and having visionary experiences, but it seems like you got it in the worst possible way. And when I was listening to you sort of report it, my heart kept going out to you, because even though you were reporting it in hindsight, after the event, you just kept going, "Oh God!" And it was so heartfelt, this kind of thing, as these flashbacks came to you. So I think
if you've never had an experience like that, it's pretty I can't really relate it to anything else, right?
Yeah. So I just really wanted to sort of pick your brains on that particular experience, and also just sort of how you think about it in sort of hindsight. So I guess maybe like a good way of sort of kicking things off is like, what's your take on what you were going through there? Because it sounds pretty sort of hellish, and yeah, just what. Is it still as raw as it was as you described it?
I would say that it's not quite as raw until I take another substance and I kind of flash back to it, depending on what I do. It's not quite as raw until I do mushrooms, or now I guess when I smoke marijuana sometimes, then I can get like flashbacks of that kind of stuff really quickly. There's a feeling I get when I start to get high, where as soon as I realize I'm getting high, sometimes all of those feelings of that big mushroom trip can come like rushing back, I guess.
So do you see any value in that particular experience, or was it just one of these things where you would write it off if you could? Because I guess the thing that I remember you saying in that particular sort of trip report, as it was that you weren't interested in sort of getting high, and you weren't interested in necessarily having a good time, which I thought was absolutely the right attitude to have, but that you wanted an experience. And it seems like you got that experience, but you got it in this kind of unpleasant manner. So was there any value in that experience for you?
There's been value, but it's hard. It's unfortunately, it's still something I'm kind of still even working through a little bit. And some of the experiences, it's hard to say if it's good or bad. So like, for instance, here's an example, right? So in the year following that trip, I had a couple of weird mental things pop up that I'd never experienced before. So one was like, and it sounds really made up. I don't mean for it to sound made up, but it really does. But like, so I had 2 or 3 days where I had like this massive and sudden onslaught of the way it's described as anhedonia, basically this like state of absence of all desires. I've never felt this in my entire life. I'm assuming that these are somehow tied to the trip, because I'm 30 now, I'm 31, and up till that point when I was 30, I'd never ever experienced anything like altering my mind like that at all. That experience was incredibly frightening, but like very insightful, I guess, because I feel like I have a decent understanding of it now. And then I also had a few days of like incredibly generalized anxiety that I've also never ever felt before in my entire life. I would say that I am one of the most confident people that I have ever met in my entire life. It's just who I am. And in this period, I was sending messages to my ex, like telling her to take my kid, that I was a horrible person, that I should never be around anyone, like just like really out of character stuff. It was like really bizarre seeing that. So insofar as like, is there value in that? I think that it has given me like a greater appreciation for how much of your mind is inaccessible to you and how much of that influences like your current thoughts. I think that it's made me be a lot more cautious with how like logical or in control of my brain that I am. I try to be a lot more aware of underlying moods that I might not notice, even if it's something as stupid as like, hey, I think I might be hungry right now. Maybe I should chill and get something to eat. Like before doing like any big tripping, I would have assumed that like I'm pretty well in control of a lot of this stuff, but now I give a lot more credit to that like underlying current of like mood or vibe or whatever. So in that sense, I think there was some value there.
I think that's what I tend to think is the value in these experiences. Is that certainly when I was, I'm 43 now, so when I was sorry, George, I would have described myself in this similar sort of very confident way where I thought I had everything sort of sorted. I knew my place in the world. I knew my beliefs. I was extremely confident in them and extremely good at sort of arguing on behalf of them. And then when I sort of had some of these experiences, it's the way it's kind of sometimes described is that it's like shaking like a bottle of soda or a bottle of champagne, and then it just pops a cork and stuff all just comes flooding out. And that can be disturbing when you first experience it. It's like, well, why would I want all this emotion and anxiety and stuff come pouring out? But it's kind of, I think it's a natural progression. It's part of our sort of life journey that you have your moment of being cocksure and being, for want of a better term, sort of arrogant and very confident in yourself. And that's awesome for the time it is. But, you don't want to be like a pensioner you don't want to be some arsehole sort of pensioner, arguing with people. There's a time to sort of transition and be open to more stuff. So I think that's where the value in these kind of substances can come from. It can like humble you. And it depends on whether you're open to being being humbled or not.
Yeah, I agree for sure. One thing that's a little disappointing to me, like I'm trying to expand it to as many life experiences as possible, but the problem is that it really feels like most of the problems that I have related to psychedelics are very particular to things that don't carry over to the rest of my life. So let me give you an example. I had a friend come over a while ago, and we did a very, very small dose of mushrooms. Like it was, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but we did 2 grams of mushrooms, which should be enough for like maybe not even a trip, but like an okay amount.
Yeah.
And it feels like when I'm with other people on mushrooms, it feels like they're processing life problems, or they're thinking about like they're getting new perspectives on issues that they have, or things from deep inside of them are coming out or whatever. Like that seems to be the case. And for me, it's just the same problem of like not knowing if I exist because my senses are being hardcore fucked with, and it just blows my mind that like everything might be fake. It always runs back to the same thing. So the one disappointing thing is that like I don't think I've ever had a trip where it's like, oh wow, like I'm thinking about this particular thing in a new way or whatever. It's all like over this kind of weird existential stuff. It doesn't seem to be applicable to much other part of my life unless I try really hard to make it applicable.
I think that's the kind of the classic case of being very much inside your own head, which I think is something that someone like yourself is. You're always processing a lot of sort of thoughts, and you've always got your eyes on a lot of different topics. So it does lead to you sort of being very much in your own head. And there's a lot of sort of like psychedelic woo terms, like you need to surrender and you need to let go of these things and stuff like that. And they're right, but it's not that sort of easy. It's not something you just sort of can flick a switch and know how to do. And I used to also really struggle with it. Like I'd be sat there, on some retreat in Peru, having drank a load of like ayahuasca or something like that, thinking and just overthinking like what is this experience and how am I going to make a video about this experience? How am I going to explain this experience that I've not even yet had? And you just kind of there's no sort of like easy answer to it, but there were just a moment where I just kind of like just let it go, dude. Just stop. Like the term surrender gets used, which people would tend to sort of think of as like stop fighting, like give up. But I would sort of think of it more in terms of like just stop fighting yourself. Just like trust yourself to go with the experience. And I think when by doing that you can sort of open up to a lot of these things. But if I can just come back to you sort of that particular trip you talked with the 10.5 one. I think possibly a lot of what was keeping you out of that mindset, you did reference a lot that you were like looking at your phone a lot all the time, and that the people you were with were constantly like sort of almost fucking with your head by the sounds of it. It sounded like they were saying like some stuff to make you doubt your own reality. So,
well, yeah, not intentionally by them, unfortunately. Just when I get into these states, everything feels that way. So, for instance, I got high once. So just to explain this real quick, I don't know if this is normal, and I've read it apparently sometimes. When I smoke marijuana now, it's a full-on like psychedelic, like it feels like mushrooms to me. Like if I got pretty high, it would feel like I'm on a mushroom trip. That's the feeling that I get. So like when I do that, when I'm around people, sometimes I'll warn them like, hey, like if I do this, there's like a 50-50 chance I'm gonna have like a decent panic attack, like just here, blah blah blah. Like if anything that somebody says to me in that state is always gonna feel like gaslighting to me, because it feels like so for instance, like if I have a friend saying like, hey, like you smoke, it'll be over soon, like don't worry, like it feels like my own mind is inventing that story to tell myself, to make myself not like freak out. Like so I'm just bringing that up because like in that one video it felt like I think I said multiple times that it felt like they were like fucking with me. I don't think that was their intention. That's just how my mind was interpreting everything at the time. So for instance, one of the people in that video was like, isn't it weird that like we didn't even really know each other and now we're doing mushrooms? Like I think when he was saying that, he was like, oh, that's like really cool. But in my mind, it was like, wait, that doesn't make sense at all. Why am I doing drugs with strangers? Holy shit, you're right. That's so fun. Like it felt like I was like fucking my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't weird until you said it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
what I'm curious, real quick. I just have a quick question. If I could ask you real quick,
sure.
You've done. It sounds like you've done ayahuasca. I'm assuming you've smoked like DMT, right?
Yeah.
Have you had like a major like psychedelic experience with like mushrooms or LSD?
What's on a par with something like DMT, or just as a sense, or well, let me put it. Go on.
Yeah, my question is gonna be like if I had like what would be considered like an ego death experience, which I think based on what I've read, if I did have that, and then I'm asking if you've had that, how is that comparable to DMT? Because everything I've read about DMT trips sounds very interesting to me, and I'm curious how comparable it is to those like massive like mushroom or LSD trips.
Yeah, okay, so it's comparable and it's also incomparable. So there is a familiarity to this space, this kind of tryptamine space. So that if you've had, like the mushroom experience that you describe, or LSD, there are parallels here. And even LSD is slightly different to psilocybin, and psilocybin is slightly different to DMT when you do it with ayahuasca or something like that. So there are parallels to the DMT thing, but the DMT experience, the smoke DMT experience, is an entirely different ballgame. It really does live up to the hype. So, and part of that is just the rapidness of it. So if you took your 10.5 gram experience, stuck it into 5 minutes, and because it's within the space of 5 minutes, also you crank it up to by a factor of about 500. And but then because it's within that 5 minute space, you don't even have the time to have the kind of reaction that you had to it. So as soon as the thought enters your head, wow, I'm in parallel universes, then that's already happened a million times, and now you're in some other state where you are now a comet on the outer fringe of the universe, and then that then instantly morphs into you are in communion with God, which instantly morphs into your ancestral lineage, and it happens just like a roller coaster is the best way of describing it. So there's no time for paranoia or even self-doubt. It's very easy just to have a complete sort of ego death experience where you don't even exist as a person. And then I've had experiences where it felt like I was there for years, but again, just being blasted through on this cosmic roller coaster, and then you're back in your body just saying, what the fuck just happened?
So that was going to be my next question too, is the feeling of time. So like for the big mushroom trip that I did, I use words like eternity or months. Like it feels like an unimaginable amount of time is passing. Does it feel the same? Even though DMT trips are relatively short, is it still the same type of feeling? Yeah,
so I had an experience, like a 5 minute experience, where I literally felt like I'd lived out a lifetime. There's the cartoon I love called Adventure Time, where there's one where one of the characters goes off climbs into his pillow and lives a lifetime within his pillow, and that was entirely my experience. I had an experience of being a cosmic being traversing the edges of existence as part of the universal consciousness, and then I came back into my body, and I was shocked. I was shocked that I was a monkey. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like I've just spent eternity out on the fringes of existence. And I was talking to a guy who is a psychedelic researcher from a place called the Quayle Institute, and they sort of study this thing, and he has a theory on why this kind of this time sort of distortion happens. And then he was saying that, you know, if we think of our brains similar to our sort of computers, and our perception of time is going into a kind of a recycle bin. So as of now, I'm talking to you, and each moment as it passes is going into the recycle bin, and so that I'm sort of freeing up bandwidth for the, you know, for me to be living in this instance. And during the psychedelic experience, that recycle bin gets shut off. So everything, instances start stacking up on top of each other, giving this feeling of parallel dimensions or infinite time. And yeah, when he sort of told me that was the theory, that made total sense to me. And it kind of works both ways, because if you are in a good experience, then you are in bliss for eternity, and if you're in a shitty experience, then it's just unstoppable hell. And it can be awful. But it's it's fascinating stuff. I love that kind of feeling of these parallel sort of dimension. I think that pops up a lot more, or a lot easier, on DMT for me. And what I do notice as well is that it's not just a feeling of time being distorted. You actually feel like you're in 20 places at the same time and having 20 existences at the same time. It's super weird.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. The way that I understand it is, it feels like I guess like when as you approach like higher levels of psychedelics, it feels like you're breaking down more of like the fundamental stuff that goes into your day-to-day experience. And one of those like really fundamental things is we are kind of like keeping track of like events in our head. So I know that like we started talking but maybe like 10 or 20 minutes ago. I know that like I was doing this, I woke up like an hour ago. That like if you have those like marks of time in your head, you kind of can keep track of what's going on. But if you start like blasting that out, then it's very quickly like you just feel like you've been somewhere forever, or maybe for no time or whatever. And that's what it felt like in psychedelics. Like I can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. Like I don't know if I've had this thought a million times or 10 times, like because you don't have the ability to keep track of time as much. Yeah.
Not only is it that, coupled with that loss of a tracking of time, there's a loss of a sense of you. So did you even exist in the moment before? It's, you know, you're constant. You can almost be in a state where you're constantly being reborn, or constantly remembering that you are you within these infinite moments, and it can get completely overwhelming and feel extremely wrong. So yeah, this is why this kind of set and setting thing I think is so important. And I think it might have been one of the reasons that you struggle with it, particularly if you've got something that's trying to anchor you back in reality, which is like I think you referenced talking to or looking at your phone a lot, because then you've got like this is like the Inception talisman. Then it's trying to, you look at your phone and it's like, okay, the phone is normal, but nothing is normal, and then sort of you go back into it for like 30 seconds, and you come back and you look at your phone, and like, you know, 30 seconds has passed, but it felt like 5 years, and it gets very head fucky.
Checking clocks or whatever is like a really big. If I'm having like a really scary trip, I'll do it, but then it just usually makes it scarier, because I'll start a trip at 9:30, and like I'll check the clock like 12 hours later, and it's like 9:34. It's impossible. Like, yeah. Jeez. But
so have you ever thought about like doing the sort of one of the classic sort of experiences that's talked about in psychedelic circles is just doing these things in a completely dark room, possibly blindfolded, in complete silence? Have you ever, and maybe that might be what you need to sort of to get you, or at least to allow you to focus more on the voices, or it's sort of, you know, the intruding thoughts. Have you ever thought going down that road?
Maybe. Well, I'm trying to like kind of I'm trying to figure out, one thing that's really hard for me is it's really hard to figure out if I'm going to have a good experience or a bad experience at any point in time, which is like very disappointing to me. So for instance, I've done MDMA with somebody that I feel incredibly close to, incredibly comfortable with, in an incredibly comfortable environment. We don't have any problems. I'm like at one of my happiest points with this person in my life right now. Like everything's cool. But even despite all of that, MDMA is very, very slightly psychedelic. I think incredibly slightly.
Yeah.
As soon as that trip kicked in, like I had a incredibly bad feeling wash over me, where like I realized that I'm high, and I'm like, holy shit, this isn't right. This isn't good. I need to get up and move around a little bit. And it only lasted for maybe 20 seconds. But even on MDMA, like I still had that experience like very briefly. So it's hard. It's just hard for me to tell if I'm going to like freak out or not, I guess. Yeah. And then like I've smoked weed with people that I Like there was a person that I smoked with a while ago. I felt incredibly comfortable with them. We were having a super fun time. We spent like a whole week together. Everything was like super cool. And then we were going to watch a movie. We were going to watch a movie, Tavington, like a movie about a stuffed bear or whatever. And, yeah. And I smoked a little bit, maybe like 2 or 3 like decent puffs, not enough to get like ultra high. But as soon as I got high, I had like a 30-minute panic attack. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't know why. It just seemed like so random. So that kind of stuff like really, bothers me. Yeah.
So how would you sort of interpret like an event like that? Would you say when you have like something like a panic attack, is this just or even related to some stuff that went down in that mushroom trip, is this just purely like an unwelcome visitor that should be written off, or do you think there's anything there to sort of be explored? Like, is it just are you just on the receiving end of a random number generator that's, your mind's just firing random shit at you and some of it lands and some of it doesn't? Or do you think that there could be, a reason for this?
Yeah, that's the hard one. Like, if I was getting like visions of like my mom dying or something, then maybe I'd be like, oh, I need to communicate with my family more, blah, blah. Like, I can understand that. But typically the reason why I feel bad, basically the stages of thought that I go through is, this is what happens. I start to get high on a substance, and what it feels like is I've stepped back into another kind of dimension, and I've realized that, oh shit, this is what reality is. It's like some box in my mind where I invent stuff. I need to delude myself into thinking that like the world is real. I need to get back to where I was before, because this current area that I'm at is completely and totally fake. Every single thing around me is a projection from my mind, and I'm completely and utterly alone in this like space. Even other people that are here are just projections of my mind, and I don't like that. Like, that's essentially like where I'm at, which feels bad. And then it's like this realization that like I can't trust my senses or my mood or anything, because everything could be fake and I have no way to validate it. Yeah.
So I mean, that sounds like quite like a sort of traumatic experience. So just out of interest, what keeps you going back there then? What?
Well, because it's not true. So I feel like I should be able to. I feel like I should, through like tiny exposures, I should be able to overcome that, because there are people that do way more fucking drugs than I have, that what you call them psychonautic, you obviously have, right? Have been to these other types of places, and you don't have these same issues with your reality being constantly undermined. So my hope is that through like tiny exposures of these drugs, that maybe if I can build up enough positive experiences, that eventually I'll be able to go back to these areas of higher experiences of more drugs, and I'll be more comfortable existing in that realm, and like, as you said, kind of like letting it go, letting it pass, and not having these horrible feelings while I'm there, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, my sort of take on it, I kind of, it might surprise you, but like a lot of, when I do things like one of these ayahuasca retreats where you go away for like a week or two and sort of, live in the middle of the jungle or something, I am absolutely expecting a difficult, possibly nightmarish experience, because specifically the thing I go there to sort of try and overcome is that my mother died at a very early age. So I'm trying to reconcile feelings which I feel I've been sort of blocked off through most of my adult life. So and when I'm on these retreats, you meet people. I've met guys who served in the military, who've watched like their sort of friends being blown apart in front of them. You meet sort of rape survivors. So you meet all sorts of kind of horror stories. And one of the reasons that you go to do these things is because, in order to sort of like, I don't, from my own perspective, I don't like the idea that there's something within me that just, it absolutely terrifies me, or that I'm not willing to look at. So I go to these experiences knowing full well that, I'm probably going to see some horrific imagery, deeply upsetting imagery of my mother, and sort of be confronted with feelings I've walled up, put behind like an emotional firewall. But you have to go through those deep waters to come out the other side. And so that's, I think, what your mentality that you're going in there with is the right one. And I would almost sort of, I get.
Oh wait, fuck.
What?
God, I'm so stupid. I'm sorry. Hold on. Just give me like 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
What was
Keep
up?
Going. When I captured your camera, I just realized that I have my Discord on the screen. And I'm sometimes people say something, I respond to somebody, and I just realize that I could just be clicking through random personal conversations. I shouldn't be doing that. It's stupid as fuck. I'm very dumb. I just realized that. It had absolutely nothing to do with what you're saying. I'm sorry. Keep going with what you're saying.
Well, yeah, difficult experiences. So yeah,
you were talking about people. I'm sorry. I'm listening to everything you're saying. It's not like that you go through these things to process difficult experiences. You've got military friends. You said that you have issue with your mom dying at an early age, and that you go knowing you're going to have a difficult experience. Yep. Okay. I'm listening. I'm sorry. It sounded like I wasn't listening to anything you said. I was. I just realized. I just clicked something really dumb real quick, and then sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's no worries, mate. Yeah. So my point was just that I would sort of encourage you to sort of continue to explore that space, and that's sometimes a controversial thing because people say, oh well, if you've got something that's traumatic, you shouldn't head towards it because this is how people end up sort of having worse trauma. But that's a school of thought I subscribe to, and so that if you have a part of yourself that you're not comfortable with, and that it's sort of, I would sort of recommend is sort of let that come, and if it does sort of come over you and that you start doubting sort of reality or your place in existence or whatever, maybe that's something that you yourself need to go through.
Yeah, I guess like the only thing that bothers me is I wish it was related to stuff in my life. Like I feel like I've had. So something I'm always worried about is I feel like I've had relatively traumatic experiences growing up, but they don't ever seem to bother me. And I've always wondered, like, do I bury that, or have I truly like gotten over it? But I've never in my entire life of ever doing psychedelics, or I've had 2 really massive mushroom trips, never in any of these has any of that past stuff ever come up. Like the only worry I ever have is just like, am I real? Do I exist? And like that's it. And that I guess that kind of bothers me, I guess.
I had a similar sort of thing. So I used to see the kind of the emotional firewalls that I talk about. I used to think that was like a position of strength, and I used to be really proud of myself for how immune I was to sort of psychological stress, and how sort of how confident I was, and all this stuff happened to me, and it was just water off a duck's back. It never bothered me. And then it did, and it happened in sort of as I kind of approached 40. It was a classic sort of midlife crisis kind of thing, and suddenly all the things which I thought were a source of strength were now like a great burden to me. I had sort of relatives who would pass away, and I felt like I owed it to them to have some kind of emotional outburst. My grandmother would die, and I loved my grandmother, and I wanted to express some tears, and I couldn't. I just didn't have that emotional capacity, and so I kind of recognized that, okay, maybe I need to like undo myself a little bit here, and I really have to sort of challenge myself. So I did the same thing. I went looking to psychedelics, and I was like very much in my head like, okay, I'm gonna face dead mom. I'm gonna face dead mom. I'm gonna I was getting fixated on how I was gonna smash it out, and by doing that I got nowhere, and it took a long time of me to be able to get this kind of to this state of surrender that I talk about. And again, there's no sort of easy roadmap for it. But it was just, I just got to a point in my life where I just felt like I was just emotionally retarded, and I didn't want to pass that on to my kids. I wanted to sort of make sure that, I was being the best parent I could be and the best husband I could be. So I felt like the way I need to do that was just, to shake up that champagne bottle I talked about and just let it sort of spray out. And in all honesty, I think it has helped. But I do think there are sort of, I think there's just a certain point in your life when you're ready for it, and maybe without again, not sounding like some sort of elitist gatekeeper, but maybe it's not at that point where you're ready for it yet, mate.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's really hard to. One of the hardest things is probably to be honest with yourself. A lot of people delude themselves into thinking a lot of things, and obviously none of us ever think we are. So I don't think I am, but it's hard to know truly, right? I do try to actively, like, since my psychedelic experiences all revolve around pretty like non-related to life questions, I do try really hard to take as much as I can out of these experiences, since I'm not going to walk around questioning reality too hard. And I think I have discovered a few things that I don't think I would have otherwise. So I had another accident. I had an accidental, really massive trip. I think about 8 months ago, me and my fiance were taking mushrooms. They were crushed into like the little pill forms, and I think we'd gotten about 2.5 hours in, and we'd felt nothing. So we thought they were dead. So the classic idiot thing of eating more and more and more. And then about 8 grams in, I started to feel it, and then I really started feeling like, oh shit, I fucked up really hard. And then that was a really massive trip. But something that I had realized throughout the trip is So like this is kind of weird. So we might maybe be very similar. You might be me 10 years from now, because I also to some extent in my earlier life saw not as much in the past 5 years, but definitely 10 years ago I saw like my emotional disconnect and coldness as a great source of strength. Because especially in what I do online, holy shit, it's very helpful. But something that I realized was that when I had my first huge mushroom trip, I was left with this horrible fear that like reality was fake and everything was not real and blah, blah, blah. And that seemed really scary to me. But I don't actually think that that was scary to me. When I had my second massive trip, what I realized is that the scary thing wasn't that everything was fake, it's that there were no other people. And it's the idea of like being stuck alone in an area indefinitely is a horrifying thought to me. And whether or not things are real or fake, like if there are other people there, it's actually okay. But the idea of being stuck in an area alone, so it kind of showed me that like my connections with other people are quite important in my life. That I can't, like going it alone or having no friends or family or whatever is like probably not a good way to live life, because it seems like something that inherently or internally is very terrifying to me.
I mean that feeling of sort of loneliness is I've had that in one experience where I've just hit by levels of loneliness I did not even know were possible, and it is absolutely sort of terrifying. So again, so maybe, I mean, as you kind of identified, there's possibly something there that, around your sort of feelings of loneliness or abandonment, or also perhaps a feeling of just that you are solely responsible for the sort the world. You are the only person in the world, and so it's kind of all on your shoulders. And I think that's kind of one of the sort of fun things I like doing with these experiences, is just they're very interpretive. And I try and stray away from this. Some people who look into these experiences as a source of like ultimate truth, like like this is a crystal ball and you're seeing the future or something. I see it more as kind of like sort of Jungian psychoanalysis, in that it's very, there is meaning there. I guess actually, I mean, this I'd like to put this question to you. How would you interpret what's going on here? Do you think this is just like sort of just purely an effect of like drugs on the brain, or do you just to sort of play the devil's advocate, there's some like wacky, there's some theories that are out there that this is like alien portals opening up in your head, or that it's direct communion God. Where would you put yourself on that spectrum?
Man, this is really embarrassing to say, but I wonder a lot more about like post-death stuff. I feel like I appreciate a lot more my conscious experience. Before I was, and I still am to a large extent, like a very empirically driven person, but I don't take for granted the fact that I have a conscious experience as much anymore. That's something that means a bit more to me now, because it seems to be relatively phenomenal that you're like a thing that experiences things and thinks thoughts. Like it's such a phenomenal thing that like I can't even observe that, even in other human beings. I don't know if that's true. I just have to assume it because it's so unobservable to me, which makes me wonder about other potentially unobservable things. When it comes to how I view like psychedelics, I think at this point I still do think like this is a drug, causes a reaction in the brain, and that's what it is. But even if that is all it is, breaking down your perspective on things, perspective with a capital P, like your conscious experience, breaking that down and being able to step back from that is like a whole otherworldly experience. After my first big mushroom trip, the number one thing that I thought coming out of that was this was absolutely not a spiritual or godlike experience for me, but I could totally understand why somebody would say that it is 100%, and I wouldn't criticize them for it. That's kind of what I have. So
I'm more or less on the same page. So I definitely lean more towards that this is there is some sort of biochemical effect. When we're taking a substance, we're having an effect from the substance. But I sort of tend to think that this is then, I mean, the experience itself is completely loaded with meaning, and I don't believe that it's some kind of just some sort of random crazy shit that's happening. I think whatever's coming to the surface, I mean, it's certainly influenced by the setting that you're in. So if you're watching some sort of film, that'll start getting integrated into it somehow, or if you listen to music, that gets integrated.
Yeah, sure.
But if you're just on your own in a dark room, then it will be it is you. You are taking a journey into you, and so I think a lot of this stuff is like sort of archetypal. I think that's kind of sort of fascinating. I think that is why you can have these kind of healing experiences of getting over emotional trauma, because you are sort of diving into yourself and your subconscious and things that you are not even aware of. The class thing is, we have thoughts are popping into our heads, or even the words that come out of our mouths. We are kind of like not fully in control of these processes. I mean, I don't really know what next word is that comes out of my mouth, but So yeah, so I think the idea that there's all this subconscious stuff going on is not particularly controversial, and that when we take these psychedelics, we're just sort of more in touch with these archetypes, these subconscious systems, and that's why it feels like another world, or it feels alien, because it is alien to our waking consciousness.
I'm just curious, have you ever read or are you aware of the Harry Potter books?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There's something that I think is relevant. There's a very interesting line that Dumbledore says to Harry when he's in like the train station at the end of the last book. Harry asks him some question about like, is this real or is this all in my head? And Dumbledore responds with, well, of course it's all in your head, but that doesn't make it any less real. And that's kind of how I would view like these types of trips. Like, yeah, like it might just be a chemical breakdown of stuff going on in your head. It might make it blah, blah, blah. That could all be true, but that doesn't mean that there's any less meaning in it. And it doesn't mean that there can't be like some great insight to be found there. And it doesn't mean that that can't be like some shared experience that all of humans have, because we do share like a similar biological foundation or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly in line with my own experiences. So, and I have to be sort of careful with my wording here, because I do try and present myself as kind of like, you know, a rational sort of skeptical person interpreting these experiences. But I have had these experiences of being in communion with, like, you know, you could call it God, or you could call it like the higher power. I'm not saying I necessarily believe that there is some sort of, you know, fluffy figure in the sky. You know, this God could have been a representation of myself as my own higher power, my own goals and objectives. But I had that experience, and I cannot not have that experience now. And it's so I have to sort of do something with it. And I mean, all we have is our own experience. So to me, that sort of happened, and I'm not now going to live my life as though, like, you know, God is watching over me necessarily, or that, you know, I've certainly had experiences where I've seen alien entities, or like the comet experience where I imagined I was a comet drifting around the universe. I had that experience, and it was if we take the comet experience as an example, it was full of awe and wonder. And it's not really often within life, that within our sort of modern life, that you get to truly experience awe and wonder. I mean, I think possibly, you know, the last time would have been when you were a kid sometime, you know, where it's like, wow, something incredible just happened. But as an adult, we don't really have those experiences. So that's what I think the benefit is of these things, is that, you know, ultimate gratitude, ultimate awe, ultimate wonder, communion with something that you feel is bigger than yourself, even if it is just you. And it's as real as, you know, as if I banged this table now. It's you know, then you can go down a whole sort of slippery slope of what is consciousness, and, you know, is all reality a thing. And I'm not particularly interested in that. What I'm kind of interested in is that I know I am having a conscious experience, and I want to make this the best conscious experience I can. I want to sort of, try and make it as a positive experience in line with my own goals and objectives, and make sure the people I love are you know, I'm having a positive influence on them. So it's as real as any other experience in that sort of terms. But then again, within my circles, you do get a lot of people who sort of take it a step further and will then sort of claim, it is actual reality, and so that there's a kind of blending of subjective and objective, and so you start getting all sort of people who I think are a little bit sort of out there, where they start claiming about, you know, being able to heal people, you know, heal all diseases with their mind, or be able to sort of, you know, telepathic or stuff like that. And that's the kind of the voice I try and sort of debunk a bit within my channel, is like, because I think these experiences are so amazing within themselves. I don't think they need like any bullshit bolted on top.
So something I was going to say is exactly that. Is I would actually go back to my I'm a lot less militant about it today, but I used to be very, very, very hardcore anti-theist, very atheist. And the argument that I would use there would be the same one I would use here, which is that, like, a lot of these things are incredibly amazing, but like a lot of things in your mind are incredibly amazing. Like, you don't need it to be like a spiritual or godlike thing for it to be an amazingly awesome thing. Like, there's so much potentiality within our own minds that we can, you know, explore using different methods, that we don't have to say that there was like a god there or some mythical extra thing that gave it to us. It can exist all on its own and be a really cool thing all on its own without having to add to it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that there is a trickiness there as well, because when you start describing these transcendent experiences, then inevitably the poetic language does start coming out, and people do start very easily talking about, you know, sort of God or the transcendent, and you start using all this the language of the religious almost. And
yeah, for sure.
And so it's understandable how some people fully slip into that mode of zealotry almost around these substances, and I've certainly met people who've gone sort of jumped in feet first, and I always shy away from that. I'm always sort of like, no, bring it back, sort of ground it in your human experience, because this is where the real sort of value can happen in this experience here. Because if I'm spending the next 6 months staring at the wall, dribbling in the transcendent, that I might be having the best time of my life and feel like I'm having some kind of amazing spiritual experience, but to my wife and kids, and I'm just useless. That's there's no, or if I'm gibbering like one of these crazy people saying it's aliens, the aliens are here, then I think that's just completely missed the point of what's going on here.
Yeah. And it's also something something that's actually so disappointing to me, is that it took me so long to discover this whole other world. Because they really are. Psychedelics are like an entirely other world.
Sure.
That, like, if you like, the first time I took a psychedelic, especially coming out of it, like, but one of the first thoughts I had was like, holy shit, like, how has this all like always existed and been here? And I had like no, like, it felt like I don't know if you have an experience. It's like if you're playing like a video game and there's like a shop or something that you missed in the starting town that would have helped you so much, and then like you find it like when you're almost done with the game and you're like, oh my god, this was here the whole fucking time. Like, gee, like this changes everything. It feels similar with like with like psychedelics. Like, geez, I'm like 30 trying this for the first time. This whole other world exists and I had no fucking idea. And it's like a whole world that's completely full of its own experiences, senses, feelings, emotion. Like everything is like, Jesus, it's kind of weird. But part of the big turnoff from that for me was for so long, like. No offense, it sounds like you might hold a similar-ish opinion. People that talk about drugs just say crazy, stupid shit all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's people that talk about marijuana and how smoking it will cure all your cancers, or people that talk about psychedelics. It's like, oh, dude, if you fucking drop enough acid, you're gonna meet God all the time, dude. I talk with him every day. Like, it's like, Jesus, like this sounds like such a waste of time. Like, why would I do this? So, yeah, it was pretty disappointing that it took me so long to have any interest in this kind of whole world. Yeah,
very easily it sets you kind of your bullshit detectors off, and I really dislike in my sort of like psychedelic circles. I am probably like perceived as being some kind of like ultra right wing, so not right wing in terms of psychedelic, just because I'm constantly like saying no, guys, bring it back to reality. The transcendent is over there, but you've got to make use of it here. And they're like, no, it's all the same. It's all you've never had an awakening, and so. I seem like I'll get called like a materialist, or like like I've got some sort of hard on for science, and I'm just as passionate about these transcendent experiences as anybody else is. I just want it to be sort of useful. I want it to enhance my life, because like I say, you cannot live in that space, and there's a lot of people who sort of are looking for a goal of transcendence or nirvana, as though like this is the finish line. I'm going to hit 40, I'm going to be fully awakened and fully self-actualized, and then I'm just going to put my feet up and be awesome until I die. And my opinion is like, no, that's a complete illusion. Life is a sort of a journey. It is a journey of challenges. There are going to be moments of intense happiness, intense grief, intense, you're going to have, it comes as the whole sort of shebang. And I don't necessarily want there to be a moment where it's like, okay, I'm done. That's me. Done. Just feet up. But if I could just come back to what you were saying before about the sort of the spiritual aspect, because I'll put my cards on the table. I was like sort of militant atheist, so I wasn't like predisposed at all to be looking for the transcendent, or to be looking for angelic figures or whatever. But I was, like I mentioned, I was looking to heal from it. I knew why I was trying to resolve some of this trauma, but then I ended up having these kind of sort of spiritual experiences, and I would say that the spiritual experience, without sounding like a complete wanker, the spiritual experience is almost as much of a cricket bat in the face as the discovery of psychedelics themselves, because I was like, holy shit, there is like another level to this, which I didn't. If you'd asked me if I'd wanted it, I would have said no, that's bullshit. But having experienced it, it is desirable to be in that state. And I don't want to say spiritual. I don't mean necessarily like I'm on my hands and knees worshipping or whatever like that. It's just a sort of a connection with a higher power which can be yourself, or like the spirit of humanity, or the spirit of the cosmos, or again, even using the word spirit's loaded, because it sounds like I'm going into the supernatural thing, but it's just an ideal. And I think when when you feel like you're aligned with that ideal, just like when you're with a partner, you can be with in a relationship with someone and be completely at odds, and the sex you have there's no joy in it. You're just sort of fulfilling your own need, your own sexual needs. Or then you could be with somebody you absolutely love, and you can just spend time with them and just feel completely content, and it's like another level of relationship, and it's and then everything else gets better. So I think that the spiritual aspect is, I wouldn't necessarily discount that sort of too much, again, without trying to sound like I'm evangelizing sort of too much. But do you think I know you sort of mentioned that you think there might be something there. Is it just that you'd sort of seen a possibility there, or?
I would describe these as it sucks because a lot of these terms have been, I don't want to say hijacked by religion, but they kind of are.
Well, they have, definitely.
Yeah, they kind of exclusively, or they appear to exclusively apply to religious experiences. But it definitely feels like there is something there that is some common shared human experience, and it could just be because we all are made of the same stuff. And I think that doing these types of drugs can probably key you into that a little bit more. Yeah. What more specific, I guess, are you asking in terms of that?
I guess I was just asking if it's something you feel like you've experienced, or if it's something you would want to experience, or are you still in that sort of the kind of the state of mind where I describe, where it's like.
I think to experience. Are you talking about wanting to experience like a oneness, or a spiritual thing, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I would say that is actually the same thing. The oneness is the kind of the spiritual thing. So even on sort of quite low doses of something like LSD or something, you start feeling a kinship or a oneness with just nature around you. I don't know if you've ever done it outdoors, but you do start feeling sort of connection with trees and stuff like that. And then that sort of escalates as you go through sort of bigger doses in sort of certain circumstances. So when you're in one of these ayahuasca retreats where you're in the middle of you're completely isolated, your phone doesn't work anymore, you're in a completely dark room, there's some dude just chanting at you for hours, and it does have an effect. It does sort of put you in a certain state of mind, and you start feeling that oneness amplified to 1,000,000. And I guess my sort of question is is that, does that sound appealing to you, or does your skepticism block you off from that?
I've never had an experience of oneness. That's never been something that I've felt. Maybe in the future I'll get there. Usually it's extreme isolation.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never actually felt the oneness before, unless maybe I felt something that other people would describe as oneness. So the closest thing that I can think of that could possibly be oneness is on that very first, that 10.5 gram trip, and a little bit on my 8 gram one. When in the beginning part, I would say it must be in the first maybe 2 hours when that starts to kick off. If I close my eyes, I guess in the first time it's moving through fractal tunnels of light, and kind of completely losing sense of who I am. I don't have control of my body. You could probably pick me up and carry me around and I have no idea. If people consider that oneness, then I guess I felt that. But I guess in those states, all I ever kind of experience is usually so I described this on my first trip. The feeling was that I'm not even sad that I'm died, but rather I have the awareness that a person used to exist that would have been called my name, and that person maybe fucked up and did too many drugs or something. That would be the experience I have. So I don't know if that's, if people consider that to be oneness or not, but that's typically my experience. Yeah
I'd say the feeling of oneness it's almost like a supreme clarity, and everything everything just seems to fall into a perspective of unity, and that you realize sort of that, yes, I am a person descended, from a long lineage of person descended from this planet formed from dust, and this is sort of my place in the cosmos. And you sort of, you realize that, we're all, you start feeling this kinship with the other people around you, but also the planet itself. It's a very lucid sort of moment of clarity, and the chatter in your head just drops away completely. And this kind of, so it's this.
So the closest that I've had to that is during both of my big trip experiences. It's so hard to explain this. This area is so cool, but I don't know how to get there every time. But it feels like on a major trip, for mushrooms, the journey up and down is pretty fucking harsh. But it feels like sometimes I will plateau in these areas where I will break through with what feels like extreme lucidity, but it's in a totally fucking other dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah, this happened on my first trip. I remember there was a girl that I was talking to, and there were moments where it's like, oh shit, hold on. I'm extremely lucid right now. Where am I? What am I doing? What's the important thing here? Am I having an important conversation? Like, it feels like I'm processing things as a normal human, but I'm like a totally different universe doing it. If that is it, then maybe that might be a little bit closer to that feeling of unity. I think on my first big trip, though, during I had two moments like that. One was talking to this other person, and the other was talking to myself in a mirror in a bathroom. But in both of those moments, I was trying to figure out if I had killed myself trying to prove something to myself for my stream. With something, because like when I did the massive drugs, it was in response. A lot of people were talking about like ego death will help you, blah blah blah, and it sounded so stupid. And that's why I like did so many. I was like, this is dumb. Like, let's just get mushrooms over with. Like, I'm sure I'm just gonna be really high and laugh for a while, and it's whatever. And yeah, during those two very lucid moments of my trip, I say lucid, but I was very fucking high. It felt like I was kind of talking through and working through. And those moments are so cool because on the way up and on the way down, on the way up, things are like. It's so hard to describe this, but like when I'm tripping, things look very three-dimensional in ways that they don't normally. Like, I'm getting an extreme sense of like three-dimensionality, and then also there's like a lot of weird, like little weird light things are happening, everything, and it's very crazy. And then also like I'm gonna be totally in control of my body. It might be that I get stuck in thought loops that are really cancerous or really bad, and I hate getting stuck in those. Like, oh god, if I thought this was, oh shit, if I thought this was like that. But in these breakthrough moments, all of that is completely gone. I feel like a totally lucid 100%. Like I could get up and walk around and live a life in like another dimension. So all of that is gone. You're just like in a plateaued in a part of the trip that's like incredibly interesting. Those moments I have experienced. Those are incredibly awesome to me. Maybe those are moments where people experience great oneness or whatever, but I was thinking of other things or working through other things at the time, so I didn't get to have those thoughts. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say if you were in an environment where you could sort of stay in that moment or sort of carry on with it. So this is again where like being out in nature or being on a retreat is really good because there's just no disturbance. It's just you and that moment, and you can sort of really explore it. But yeah, what sort of what you mentioned about the sort of the lucidity of that moment, because when you're on the way up, there is a kind of a drunkenness, a highness to it, and then it's
mental chaos. But
and then the wave kind of breaks into this moment of clarity. So yeah, maybe that's something to sort of to explore there. And there was something around but when you sort of talk about things becoming 3D on the way in. This is one of the things which, if you do get around to trying DMT, it just takes that to a next level. And I've sort of referred to this as like the cosmic Lego, because that 3D, that sort of parallaxy sort of light popping around you that you get on magic mushrooms, what you see on DMT is the complete disintegration of the world around you in like 4D telepathy, and then the complete reintegration of this this new cosmic realm of like everything you hear Joe Rogan talk about in terms of like crystal temple stuff. It's absolutely like that. But again, that language doesn't do it any justice at all.
Yeah, of course, which sucks, because if I try to explain anything related to this to my audience, you sound like a fucking lunatic.
And it's tricky. That's kind of like the challenge of what I'm trying to address with my channel. It's that language doesn't do it justice. You're talking about like 12-dimensional objects within sort of monkey language, and it doesn't work at all. But you have to do your best and put some sort of fluff and some poetry around it. And But
one of the things that psychedelics made me very aware of is there's a term in I've talked about this a lot in this term. There's a term in philosophy called qualia. Basically, like an experience of something. And you truly, a lot of people don't realize this, but you can't actually tell anybody what anything feels like. You can't actually describe a feeling to anybody. It's actually impossible. The only thing you can do is you can describe things that feel like it and hope that they've had that shared experience. So for instance, if I try to explain like what does softness feel like, I can like, well, pillows are soft, cats are soft, your hair could be soft, your skin. But if you've never felt any of this, you just have you actually don't know. You cannot communicate quality from one person to another. So generally, this isn't a problem because we all have like a shared set of experiences. If I tell you like the stove is hot, well, you know what hot things are like because you've felt hot things before. But when we talk about like trips, well, if you've never had a psychedelic experience before, like, it's hard to like, I don't even know where to start there, you know, in terms of describing that to somebody else because they have no foundation to even work off of.
Yeah, it's I would say it's like next to impossible, and so it's, but it's poetry basically. That's the only way you can sort of do it. You're saying this is, I am saying words now to invoke something in you, which is something like this, but it's nothing like it.
And then it sucks too because especially again you sound pretty similar, like, and me, I'm a very empirical person, so as soon as people start talking poetry about something, it's like, okay dude, sure, because it makes it because when you're experiencing it doesn't feel like poetry. It's very fucking real. What you're experiencing is
more real than real. Yeah,
it is incredibly a very real, very grounded experience when it's happening. So it sucks that you have to make so many allusions to more artistic things in order to get people to understand, and then even at that you don't truly get the understanding until you've actually done it.
And that feeling of sort of it being more real than real, it's so slippery because you have one of these moments of supreme clarity and the universe just clicks into place and all makes sense, and you're like, I've got it. I will remember this forever. I cannot wait to tell people about this. And then within moments, it's slipping away, and your language is reverting back to sort of like, oh, but I can't quite. The idea is gone, and yeah, that's why there's a kind of a popular term in sort of psychedelic circles around this integration, where you spend time after your experience to really sort of interrogate what you went through and and see what it means to you. Like if even if you had a bad experience, like well why was it bad experience? Why do you think that happened to you? That the bad experience was not inherent to the LSD. There's nothing in the mushroom necessarily that's bad, because someone can take it and have it good. So why do you think that bad experience happened to you? And I think this is one thing where we're sort of lacking a little bit in the Western world, because if you go to somewhere like the jungles of South America or something, and you have an absolutely transcendent experience, you can wake up in the morning and go to your neighbor and say, yeah, I absolutely tripped balls last night on ayahuasca, and the spirits told me this, and that's just a conversation on a Tuesday. If I go into work and have that conversation, I'm going to get locked up by lunchtime. They get fired. So we don't have a kind of a structure where we're able to talk about these experiences, where I could happily go into work and tell them, oh, I got absolutely shit-faced on alcohol last night, it was a right laugh, and they'd, yay, everyone pat me on the back. But if I went in and said, yeah, I met God last night, they'd be like, right, yeah, Rob's just completely lost his shit. So this is like, I'm involved with a few projects where we sort of try and have circles where people can talk about these experiences and have be able to sort of like verbalize them in a sort of a non-judgmental way. And I think that's something we're going to need more of as we try and bring these things into the Western world.
Yeah, because my mom, for instance, is very conservative, and I love her to death. Like every single time I have one of these conversations, I don't know if she'll end up watching like the VOD on this. But like anytime I have these conversations, she'll be messaging me, telling me she's worried about me, that I need to stop doing drugs because they're bad for you, blah blah blah. Because like a lot of people, things like acid or mushrooms, it's basically the same thing as like heroin or something. These are like ultra hard, like super destructive drugs that if you take them, it's because you're depressed or self-destructive or whatever. And it's like, jeez.
I mean, how does, just out of interest, like how does that sort of factor into like with the other stuff you do? Because you get into some like pretty intense sort of like fiery debates and sort of I've seen people who are sort of seem out to get you or out to silence you and stuff. So, but I bet your mother would. Or I'm completely assuming. I bet your mother would not have any problem with that aspect of your life. That's like kind of like the normal day to day. But then the moment like you're having a sort of you start talking about something transcendent, which I would argue is like a sort of an intrinsic part of a human experience. Then it's like, whoa, Destiny's lost his. We're worried about destiny.
Yeah, well, I mean, even more than that is it usually like the most frustrating conversations I have with the most frustrating conversation I ever had with my mom about drugs was actually when we were out and she was drinking, and it just felt so incredibly. This was just over marijuana, and she was giving me the same Republican lines of like, well, with alcohol, like I can just drink a little bit, I'm not going to hurt anybody else. Whereas when you smoke, reefer and pot, like these things you get addicted to it very quickly, and they have very negative impacts on your life, blah blah blah. And it's like, Jesus, like. like just a little bit of self-awareness, like, oh my God. Like,
yeah,
it's very frustrating.
we have the same with my wife's parents, who will sit there and in all fairness to them, they're very understanding of what we do, and they sort of, you know, they'll sort of look after the kids for a week while me and my wife go on retreat and stuff like that. So they are very understanding, but still they will just knock back like cans of beer by the just six packs, just throwing them back every night, and then sit there and like sort of raised eyebrow. All right, have you drunk your funny jungle medicine? Have you? Like there's a real sort of lack of sort of self-awareness. But I suppose that comes into like another point I wanted to raise with you. Like, what's your take on what's sort of like happening here with the sort of the expansion of these things, which does seem to be happening. You know, I do have a sort of a bit of eyes on what's going on in the US, and there seems to be that like lots of states are talking about legalizing these things. So you know, this is something that someone like your mother, it's kind of colliding with. I guess it's already colliding with her with the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. What's your thought there? Is this a good thing? Do you think we should be?
Yeah, my number one thought around all of this is a little bit negative, actually. My number one thought is I'm actually so incredibly fucking irritated that it has taken so long for any of this to actually be brought to the forefront, for two reasons. One, I think it is criminal that so much of our research around SSRIs is like fucking 50, 60 years old. I think it's insane that it's taken us so long to explore other substances when so many people in the US are having problems with these things. I think it's like 17%, 15% of women in the US have taken like an antidepressant in the last month. It's like, these are unbelievable numbers. And even for men, it's like 8 or 9%. These are unbelievable numbers of people on SSRIs. And for all of these people to be doing this, and for us to be doing no research on any other substance, is incredibly fucking frustrating. That's one. And then a second thing is, unfortunately, I think for a lot of this research, I wish it was earlier so that I could have had better access to these types of things earlier. I think it would have been fun to like experiment with psychedelics in my like mid-20s rather than having to do till I was 30. And I think it would have been so cool to see my parents try just one time, because they have such negative opinions of these types of drugs. Like to watch my mom do LSD one time to see what her thoughts were coming out of it, because I'm pretty sure she thinks that when you do it, you just get goofy and laugh and you're just an idiot, and you're doing drugs like heroin or whatever. But it is one of the most interesting things in my life, is how my mom would, what kind of conversation I could have to her after her doing like a mushroom or LSD trip. Not even like a huge one, but just like any type of experience like that. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I think it's quite a common thing. In fact, I've got a friend who just had that experience where sort of, you know, the mother had expressed a bit of interest and they'd already had like a conflicting relationship. So, but it seemed like a mum was curious, so she sent her some mushrooms, and yeah, and apparently it's gone really well. And it's something that I'm sort of, as a parent, having to sort of think like, how would I approach this if I ever have to cross that bridge of my kids being interested with it. And I try and sort of keep them, you know, I don't lie to them about what's going on, but I don't want to sort of give them too much information that compromises their childhood. But yeah, I guess it's one of those.
Well, what do you mean about that? I'm actually really curious what you mean exactly by that. Like, how do you balance that? Or actually, let me pose a hypothetical. Your kid is wait, how old are your children, if you don't mind saying?
Yeah, well, my oldest is a teenager. I'll put it that way.
Okay, gotcha. I have my son. I almost say my oldest. I have one kid, hopefully. My son is 9 years old, so it's still quite a bit younger. But say your son comes up to you when he's 18 and he starts talking about like, oh my God, I heard all these things about LSD or mushrooms. What kind of a conversation do you have with him about that? Are you don't do drugs or? Yeah, I'm super curious how you would approach that.
Yeah,
it's too personal. You have to answer as well.
No, I'm absolutely fine with answering that one. So personally, I would take it as a given that it's kind of going to happen anyway. I think people sort of experiment with these things. I would be an absolute hypocrite if I was going to sort of put the law down there. What I would try and do is I would just give them the information, just give them the facts. I know that sounds like a very sort of hippie sort of like oh yeah, just tell them. But I think my expectation would be that somewhere between the age of 15 and 20, yeah, I would absolutely have expected my kids to smoke marijuana and done some sort of psychedelic and possibly some other substances as well. I think that's just sort of par for the course. I think I first tried LSD when I was like 15 or something like that. No, I'm not saying I'm not advocating for that, and I certainly don't want to push anything onto my kids. But again, I'd want them to know that if they got themselves into some sort of state, that they knew they could come home and that they would know the sort of situation that it wouldn't be sort of judged. It wouldn't be. I'd rather they were here with me rather than sort of freaking out somewhere in the street. But in terms of how I sort of approach my own sort of use of these substances with them, so like when we do something like a retreat, then yeah, we sort of tell them that we're going on retreat, and that we're trying to, we tell them that we're doing this thing called ayahuasca, which again, and in the countries that we do it in, it's not illegal. We're not up to anything sort of nefarious. It's just a shift in culture, and yeah, and they say, Daddy, why'd you do this? And I say it makes me feel better. It's something and I explain to them about my own sort of childhood, again, without sort of giving them too much information to sort of compromise them. But I just say, yeah, sometimes you need things to sort of to help you process things. So I think they kind of understand that, and in a weird kind of sort of like unexpected benefit to me. It's typical for kids to rebel against their parents. So they rebel against me by just being incredibly square, incredibly like just completely disinterested in all this stuff, and they think it's completely lame. That all this talk of spirituality and transcendence is just complete bullshit. So in that way, as a parent, it's completely worked in my favour. And but I think if it comes to it, and if there was a time when they were like sort of 18 or whatever, and they wanted to come with me and do a retreat, I would welcome that. I've no idea how that would play out. I can imagine that would be a challenge to any kind of parental-child relationship, but I think I'd be up for it. I think it would be the potential there is for it to be a beautiful moment, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was super interested. I think I would be really excited if my kid, not now when he's 9, but earlier, wanted to explore those types of things. I'd be really interested in seeing his response to it and how everything goes with that. Yeah.
So I guess from what you're saying before, like, you're sort of like, you're completely in favour of this sort of decriminalisation and this kind of like expansion, or is there a point where you draw the line there? Like, so it's like psychedelics is. And I guess this comes to the label of drugs, which I think is completely unhelpful, because I think psychedelics and like heroin are completely different things. So
just calling it all drugs is so silly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So would you just be is it just the kind of like the psychedelic marijuana stuff that you'd be interested in, or do you think there should be a complete decriminalisation across the board?
Yeah, so my answer is really boring here. The way that I view all of this stuff is I'm incredibly empirically driven. My understanding, and if my understanding is wrong, my answer would change accordingly, but my understanding is that countries that legalize like extreme drugs, or places that have legalized like extreme drugs, you don't see everybody run out and just start doing heroin. Like, typically people don't function that way, and then the people that are addicted aren't really affected by the legality of it, because they're like, these types of addictions are mental health problems. No sane, happy human individual is going out and shooting up heroin, every day or every week. So yeah, in that sense, assuming those assumptions are true, I'm in favor of just legalizing everything. It doesn't make sense. Much the same way that I don't think suicide should be illegal, because that's just really weird, because generally mentally healthy people don't commit suicide, saving for end of life stuff, etc. I don't think that like heroin or these other drugs should be made illegal. Like, if people are having problems with them, then it should be classified as like mental health issues, and we should treat it accordingly. Just like making the drugs illegal, I think is a strange or bad step.
Yeah, I guess I think there's probably like a labeling there around sort of like something being legal or something being decriminalized. So I would be absolutely for everything being decriminalized. I don't want to see I want to see people have sovereignty over their own sort of human experience. But then that would be a different sort of thing where I would hate to see particularly something like sort of heroin being available in every sort of shop where my kids get it. Especially when you're a parent, you start seeing through this filter of like, would I want my kids to be able to get their hands on this? Even stuff like psychedelics. I think that there's a danger there in something being too readily available. And I think we saw this particularly in Europe, because I don't know if you've ever heard of a substance called salvia, which I think is pretty readily available in the US, but in the in Europe it's really strictly controlled, because it is absolutely mind bending. And there was a point in time where this was like readily available pretty much in any shop. Like, if there was a shop that sold tobacco, you could buy salvia there, and kids were doing it and just getting completely fucked up on salvia. So I think there's got to be something there around like I'd like to see things regulated in some way, but certainly not criminalized. I don't want to see people like thrown in jail, for having a bit of weed in the pocket or that kind of shit.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess if I was in favor of any kind of legislation, like, or in terms of like legalizing, decriminalizing, whatever, like this is the bare minimum that I would be accepting. Bare minimum. I don't even know if I would. At the very least, you'd be treated the same as alcohol, which is any 18, because Christ, alcohol can have such destructive effects on the mind, on the body, on relationships, on traffic. Like alcohol. If alcohol is any 18, 21-year-old in the United States can walk into a store and buy alcohol, I mean, like, you should be able to get a tab of LSD. Like, that's unbelievable to me.
Well, what about...
Especially now after having experience with these drugs. Like, the idea that I could go out right now and legally drink myself until I fucking die. I can go out and do it and kill myself in a bar. I could do it. But if I go out and spend $10, whatever, on a tab, 100 micrograms of LSD, I'm going to get busted for that, when the LSD experience is so much better, safer, and like less harmful to my body. When I say safer, I'm not going to go drunk drive or kill anybody, blah, 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 or beat the shit out of my wife or whatever. I'm like, that blows my mind. It's insane to me. I can't imagine anybody having done LSD and drunk alcohol to come away from that thinking like, whew, man, after getting wasted last night and then doing LSD the day after, we got to do something about that LSD. That's crazy. Like, really? Yeah.
I mean, I think the numbers there. I mean, if you take like the sort of the 60s as an example, and like how many people were supposed to doing LSD through the 60s and 70s, then and yeah, the typical horror stories of some guy jumping off a building and something. Yeah, these are disproportionate. Like the amount of people who were taking these things successfully. And even if these horror stories are to be believed, then I'm not necessarily even sort of true, just complete propaganda. But still, it's always like one case versus 10 million happy sort of customers. I think it's
drunk driving. Yeah,
exactly. So what would be your sort of thoughts around, like, if this was regulated through some kind of like a medical facility? Like you hear about these like LSD. I mean, at the moment, it's just kind of clinical research, but where you're checking into a facility to have a controlled experience. Do you think it should be that these things are just available for anyone, or would you?
Like the controlled experiences, insofar as therapy can be like really cool, but I have had so many like awesomely, mind-blowingly fun experiences on psychedelics. And it's incredibly cheap to do so. If I want to go out to the movies with a girlfriend, we're spending $40 maybe between 2 tickets, popcorn, drinks, maybe more. If I want to, like, if we each have 2 tabs of LSD, that's like $20. That's like 12 hours of a full day of like entertaining stuff that you can't get anywhere else. And like, I don't know, it's just like, it's such an overwhelmingly awesomely positive experience, and it's like, it's genuinely sad to me that a lot of people have never even tried it like one time. Like, it's such a cool thing. The idea that it has to be locked behind like some pharmaceutical wall, or that it has to be locked in some therapy facility or some medical facility, like, I don't know. I think it should be, I think that anybody should be free to like have that experience. It's just such a cool experience. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the argument from sort of like economic value that you're coming up with there, that was exactly where I was when I was a teenager. I was like, so you're telling me I can go and spend like $20 to £20 and get like a 6-pack and sort of feel like shit the next day, or I can spend like £3 and get a tab of LSD. I just have the most fucking awesome time watching the sunset.
For 12 hours, yeah.
It's like the value is just completely fucking like mismatched. So so I used to always put that sort of argument to my friends, like yeah, this just doesn't make sense. Like drinking does not make sense as a teenager.
In LA, if I go out and get a mixed drink at like a restaurant or a bar, that's 3 tabs of LSD. These things are expensive as fuck. Yeah.
The argument from this is like a new vector to get things legalized. It's just how much money would people save? How much better would the economy be if if people just did LSD instead of it?
Something else that I really enjoy too, I'm going to be careful not to generalize here because maybe it's my own experience, but I've heard a lot of people echo similar sentiments. I really like that there is a feeling of completion from a trip as well. So for instance, when I do drink, I like to get shit-faced, okay? Just because it's very fun for me. But you can go too far with drinking, and it's bad effects on the body the next day. And there are drugs that are like that, where you can go too far. I have never in my life finished an LSD or mushroom trip where it's like, I need more right now.
On
MDMA, I've had that feeling for sure. But like on LSD or mushrooms, you set aside for mushrooms 6 hours, you have it for 6 to 8 hours, you have a trip, and when you're done, I'm done. That was so much fun. I don't need to do it right now. I don't need to do it again. I don't even need to do it tomorrow. Like, I had a trip. It was super fun, and I'm cool with that. And then same thing with LSD too, especially because it's so long. Like, but when you finish an LSD trip, it's like, oh, that was cool. I'm done. Like, there's like the chapter, the bookend or whatever. Boom, it's done. Cool. And then maybe you'll do it again in a week or a month or 2 months or whatever, whenever you're ready to next. I like that feeling of completion that comes along with those trips too. Like, it feels like you're doing, like, you are like a very clear demarcation in time where this is what's happening here, and then when you're done, you have a feeling of completion or finality after it as well. That I think is really cool too.
Yeah, and I think that sort of journey that you go through, that, I mean, you know, that's maybe, I don't know if that's the rationale behind calling it a trip or not, or if it's just related to tryptamines, but that's what kind of it bookends like your own human experience. So if you take, say, you know, you take acid and then you go camping with your friends, and again you watch the sunset or you watch the sun come up. You know, I had some experiences where I was at like Stonehenge on the winter solstice, and there's all these fucking druids wearing hats with goat horns on, and they're all dancing around chanting, and you see the sun come up through Stonehenge, and it's just fucking amazing. And at that point I was on like the tail end of the acid I'd taken to sort of, you know, enjoy the festivities the night before. And you just, like you say, you get these completely bookended experiences of there's an A and there's a B. And then after that, I feel absolutely fine. Like, there's no hangover. I don't get that with MDMA. With MDMA, I sledge hard and get that hangover. And I do get very fiendish, like what you just mentioned, like more. I want more of this love feeling. But with psychedelics, you get a complete journey from A to B. And yeah, it's a very powerful sort of like self-contained narrative, and it's one of the things I sort of really enjoy about it. Mm-hmm. One sort of last thing I sort of wanted to sort of touch on is, like, in the terms of things being sort of, you know, regulated or sort of decriminalized, or whether it goes into sort of centers or whatever, there's then this kind of sense of it, now something is being invaded by capitalism, and that's now sort of encroaching on what is kind of a spiritual experience for some things. So you particularly get this when you do go to somewhere like South America, and there are these sort of ayahuasca retreats, and you know, some of them are literally like huts in a village where it's just some villager dude, and some of them, these are like luxurious retreats with swimming pools and stuff like that, where, you know, some guys come in. And I know that there's, you know, some of these kind of churches are ingressing into the US, and certainly some of these retreats here in the UK, and it's a weird balancing act, because on the one hand I go to these retreats, and I'm glad for the opportunity to be able to go to somewhere like South America and there to be a translator. I don't go to the ones where they've got swimming pools and stuff like that. I can't afford it, but you know, where there is a sort of a certain amount of Western infrastructure, without which I could not have accessed that thing, because I don't speak good enough Spanish, or, you know, I've not got those connections. And yeah, I just wondered, this is like a sort of a common thing, that capitalism is now invading into the spiritual, or invading into the cultural, and sort of taking over, you know, sort of South American cultures, and sort of reducing the spirituality. Have you got any sort of like thoughts around that sort of, that angle of?
I love capitalism. I think capital is great for efficiently allocating capital in places where capital needs to go. Mm-hmm. My main problem is people just don't know, like, how to get, like, a problem with people in general is it's so hard for people to just get some good things out of something without, like, going overboard and taking the bad with it too. This is a criticism I make of almost everything in life. So for example, capitalism is really cool, and that it makes like a variety of products available to us to purchase through a variety of different means. Mm-hmm. I love that. But it's not good that consumerism has like invaded people's minds and made it so that like you need to buy things to be worth anything as a human being. Like, that's really bad. So like when you talk about like, is capitalism going to invade like psychedelics? Like, well, in some ways that would be fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. I would love nothing more than to be able to walk, like, oh, you're older. I don't know what your experiences were like with marijuana, but so I'm 31. Marijuana in my days in high school was horrible. You had to smoke a lot to get high, because this was some garbage quality weed. Now that weed is like decriminalized in the US, I can go down to a store and I can buy these little presidential, whatever the fuck, I can buy weed at these stores. Well, I'll take 2 puffs and I will be fucking blasted for the whole evening. That's awesome. I like that idea of capitalism, right? If you're able to like make these products available to buy it, whatnot. But yeah, people need to be careful not to go overboard. And then also, this is true of the commercialization of any art industry. People need to make sure that if they're going after a certain experience, if they've heard really good things about it, they should probably be aware of what that authentic experience is. So for instance, like if you want to travel across, you know, like if you want to figure out like, oh, what is it like to be in the UK? Like I want an authentic British experience, and you just go to the most touristy parts of London, you're probably not getting that. Right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to know like what is the best LSD experience possible, and you go to like a $1,000 a night spa where you're in a room and they're playing like weird music on the radio and people are giving you a massage or whatever, like that's going to be a lot different than the people telling you LSD was awesome who went camping with their friends in the woods for a weekend, right? Yeah, so it's good to be aware that like capitalism is good at making some things available to us, but like don't delude yourself into thinking that like a tourist experience or something is going to get you the same type of experience as like a more authentic engagement with whether it's a drug or a tourist experience or whatever.
Yeah, totally agree, mate. And I sort of see it as it's made these kind of experiences available to me. But yeah, I'm under no illusion that my 2 weeks in the jungle is the same as somebody who's gone down the Amazon River on a boat and sort of stopped off and really sort of ingratiated himself in one of these tribes. But I think I do see it as a positive. Some people sort of say that like there's something foul about these kind of shamans charging for medicine. It's like, well, this shit grows on trees, they shouldn't say. But I think that's kind of, it's depreciating, first of all, the infrastructure that's gone into building one of these retreats to be able to, and paying for the staff and all that stuff. And also, like most people will like happily sort of pay, say like I don't know what they cost in the US, but if you go to a concert to watch some sort of band that you like, over here you might pay like anywhere between $70 to $100, to go and watch like some top tier band, and that band might be on for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, but then you're gonna sit there with some shaman in the jungle where they sing their heart out like the most beautiful tunes for like 4 hours non-stop, just belting it out. And then you're like, they're charging me money for this. It grows on trees, and there's a kind of a weird mismatch with what people sort of put value on.
Yeah, and there's also like something that you brought up. There's two really huge things here. One, you brought up accessibility. Like, let's say that these experiences become more commercialized, and now like a ton of people are doing it. For every million people that have a shitty touristy, shop around and do whatever experience, there's going to be some people that take a genuine interest in it, that have a really good experience, that dig into it more, which is awesome. And then two, this is a fight that I've had to go through a lot. Maybe you're somewhat aware of it, being like a YouTuber, being a Twitch streamer. People are always like, oh, like why do you need to make enough money to blah blah blah? It's like, well, as soon as people are making full-time income on things, they can do more with it. Like there being money there and allowing people to dedicate more time to doing a particular thing usually unlocks for them the ability to do more with it, which I think is cool. Yeah.
Anyway, mate, I'm going to have to sort of jump off this call because I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm going on vacation tomorrow, so I've got to be at the airport quite early in the morning. But yeah, I'm actually, did I hear you right that you're actually thinking of moving over to Europe? Or?
I'm always on it. We'll see how this election goes.
Okay.
I'm engaged to a Swedish girl, so if we get married, I'll at the very least I can have Swedish citizenship, and as long as I don't leave the EU like the UK did, I'll have access to the EU. So yeah, we'll see.
And what's your gut feeling on how the election's going to go?
Everything right now, every indicator is looking like Trump is going to lose pretty badly, but man, dude, so much can change in a month, so we'll see.
I've got to say, I'm not super in the world of sort of politics, but my sort of take on it was the opposite. But again, I'm getting like a sort of a different feed of information to what you're getting. But yeah, I was under the impression that it was going to go the other way. I've not got too much of a dog in that game, but I do think Trump's a tool. So
what happens, yeah.
Anyway, like I said, I'll have to jump on because I'm going to have to go and try and get myself some sleep so I can get to. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I want to just say thanks a lot for making the time. And yeah, and if you're up for doing this again sometime, or any more sort of questions about sort of DMT or retreat something, let's have another chat about it.
Yeah, and then same to you. If anything ever comes up, you can always message me. Yeah.
I do have one quick question for you, mate. What's the game that I always see you playing? It looks like some sort of like. It's kind of like building a city top-down, sort of RTS-y looking game. It reminds me of a game I used to play when I was a kid called Colony, when I used to play on the Commodore 64, so like way back. But it looks like you're kind of laying infrastructure and stuff.
Yeah, it's a game called Factorio. It's just like you just like basically you solve problems by creating more problems that you have to solve, and you just do that indefinitely, basically. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Like logic. building game, yeah.
I might look into that. That's the sort of thing I sort of really get engrossed in those kind of games. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, mate. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. And have a good weekend or night or whatever.
Yeah.
See you, dude.